There is a kind of peace that people search for constantly, yet somehow it seems to arrive only in certain rooms, certain seasons, certain rare quiet mornings. The moment life becomes noisy again, that peace disappears, as if it were never truly there at all. Buddhist teaching looks at this pattern with great honesty. It does not promise a life free of noise, disagreement, or loss. Instead, it points towards something steadier, a way of meeting any situation without being shaken apart by it. What follows is not a formula, but a slow, careful look at where real peace actually comes from. Most people quietly imagine peace as an absence, a life with fewer problems, fewer arguments, fewer sleepless nights. This is understandable, yet Buddhist teaching offers a different starting point, one that can feel surprising at first. Peace is not described as circumstances lining up perfectly, but as a settled quality of mind that remains steady even while circumstances are still imperfect. This distinction changes everything about how peace is actually pursued. A concrete human behavior shows this clearly. Someone finally gets the quiet weekend they wanted, yet their mind stays busy anyway, replaying old conversations, worrying about what comes next. The outer conditions were peaceful, but something inside was not. This reveals a subtle pattern worth sitting with, that peace was never only about the room a person is standing in, but about what the mind is doing while standing there. Early Buddhist teaching suggests that lasting peace is less about arranging the world correctly, and more about how the mind relates to whatever the world happens to bring. This is not a small technical detail. It reshapes the entire search. Instead of asking, "How do I remove this difficulty?" a different question quietly opens. How do I meet this difficulty without adding unnecessary suffering on top of it? This second question is where real practice begins. Why does peace feel so hard to keep? If peace is possible without perfect circumstances, then why does it feel so fragile, so easily lost with one difficult phone call or one sharp comment? Buddhist teaching offers a direct answer here, rooted in how the untrained mind naturally operates. Peace feels hard to keep because the mind is constantly comparing the present moment to some other moment, some better version of events that it quietly prefers. This comparing habit is worth naming clearly, because most people do it without ever noticing. A pleasant afternoon is quietly measured against yesterday's better afternoon, and a manageable problem is measured against an imagined life with no problems at all. This comparison manufactures a felt lack, even when the present moment, seen plainly, was not actually unbearable. Peace slips away not because life became harder, but because the mind kept reaching past the present moment towards somewhere else. Picture someone standing in a slow queue, sighing, checking the time again and again, though nothing about waiting itself is unbearable. Their peace was disturbed not by the queue, but by the mind insisting they should already be somewhere else. This is such an ordinary, almost invisible pattern. An ancient teaching points somewhere unexpected. To understand this more clearly, it helps to return to the Four Noble Truths, one of the earliest and most direct teachings in the Buddhist tradition. The first truth names something quietly universal, that ordinary life includes recurring dissatisfaction, friction, and discomfort, even during moments that look calm from the outside. This is not a discouraging observation. It is simply an honest starting point, free of exaggeration. The second truth points toward craving as the deeper cause of this friction, not only craving for pleasant things, but craving for situations to be different, for time to move faster, for uncertainty to resolve immediately. Bhikkhu Bodhi has written about this craving, as something observable directly in daily experience, not as an abstract doctrine reserved only for monastics. A person does not need to accept an entire belief system to notice craving arising the moment something feels unsettled. The hidden reason peace keeps slipping away. Beneath the surface irritation of daily life sits something steadier and less visible, a persistent craving for control over things that were never fully controllable in the first place. Weather, other people's moods, the outcome of a difficult conversation, the pace of healing after a loss. None of these were ever fully within anyone's grasp, yet the mind quietly behaves as though they should be, and each time reality resists, peace takes a small, familiar hit. A subtle emotional pattern appears here, one many people recognize instantly once it is named. Frustration often disguises itself as reasonable concern, when underneath it is really a demand that reality behave differently right now. Someone stuck in traffic does not simply notice the delay. They quietly insist the delay should not be happening, and that insistence, more than the delay itself, is what produces the tightness in the chest. This hidden craving for control also extends inward, toward one's own emotions. A person may feel calm should already be permanent, and each return of anxiety feels like failure rather than a natural passing weather pattern of the mind. Seeing this craving clearly, without shame, is often the quiet turning point where peace stops depending on perfect conditions and starts depending on something more workable. How the mind quietly manufactures its own storm. Buddhist teaching describes suffering as something the mind actively participates in constructing, moment by moment, often without noticing it is doing so. This can sound uncomfortable at first, almost like blame, but it carries a quieter kind of relief inside it. If the mind participates in building the storm, then the mind is not permanently at its mercy either. One simple explanation for this pattern involves the layering of story on top of sensation. A raw, brief discomfort arises, perhaps disappointment or embarrassment, and within seconds the mind adds interpretation. This proves I always fail, or this means things will stay difficult. The original discomfort may have lasted only a few seconds, but the added story can extend for hours or days, feeding on its own momentum. A real-world example makes this easier to notice directly. Someone forgets a small errand, and instead of simply correcting it, spends the rest of the afternoon quietly criticizing themselves as forgetful and careless in general. The mistake was small, but the mental storm built around it was large. Noticing this gap between the event and the added layer is often where the earliest sense of steadiness quietly begins to return. The wanting that disturbs every still moment. Craving and attachment tend to work closely together, and separating them fully is difficult even in careful reflection. Craving is the reaching towards something, while attachment is the holding, the quiet insistence that a particular outcome must occur for peace to be possible at all. Together, they explain why even pleasant still moments can feel oddly unstable, since some part of the mind is already worried about losing them. An uncommon but simple detail here involves how attachment often forms around identity itself, not only around outcomes. A person may attach to being seen as calm, patient, or spiritually advanced, and any lapse from that image creates unexpected inner disturbance. This attachment to a fixed self-image is a quiet, common human pattern, described in Buddhist teaching as clinging, that reaches even into how a person wants to be perceived. Take 10 quiet seconds. Notice one small want present in the mind right now, whether for comfort, certainty, or simply for this moment to feel different. Without pushing it away, simply notice that it is there, a wanting, rising, and passing like a breath. Jack Kornfield has often described this kind of noticing as a doorway rather than a technique, a simple return of attention to what is actually happening rather than what the mind insists should be happening instead. This doorway does not remove wanting immediately, and it is not meant to. It simply creates enough space around the wanting that it stops running the entire moment unchallenged, which is often enough to soften its grip considerably. Learning to watch without being swept away. Mindfulness, within Buddhist teaching, is not the absence of thought or feeling, but a steady, non-judging attention to whatever is present, including discomfort. Satipatthana, the early framework for the establishment of mindfulness, describes attention to feelings and mind states as a direct, practical foundation, not a distant ideal reserved for advanced practitioners. This distinction matters in ordinary life more than it first appears. A difficult emotion can be present. Anger, worry, sadness, and mindfulness does not require agreeing with the story that emotion is telling. It simply notices, anger is here, without immediately acting from it or suppressing it entirely. This small gap between noticing and reacting is often where genuine choice quietly becomes possible again. Thich Nhat Hanh often described returning attention to the breath as a way of coming home to the present moment, not as an escape from difficulty, but as a steady place from which to observe difficulty clearly. This is a simple, repeatable practice, requiring no special conditions, only a willingness to pause and notice, even briefly, before being fully swept into reaction. Why nothing around you was ever fixed, impermanence or anicca, is one of the three characteristics of experience described throughout early Buddhist teaching, alongside suffering and non-self. It does not describe loss as tragedy. It simply names an observable fact that all conditioned experience rises and passes, including difficult situations that currently feel permanent and overwhelming. This can feel difficult to accept in a hard moment, because pain often convinces a person that the current state of things is final and unchanging. Yet a plain look at memory shows otherwise. Almost every difficult season eventually shifted into something else, even if slowly and without clear announcement. Buddhist teaching invites direct observation of this pattern rather than blind belief, encouraging a person to notice change quietly happening even during difficulty. Alongside impermanence, non-self offers a related kind of ease, not by denying a person's existence, but by loosening the idea of a fixed, permanent self who must always feel a certain way. A difficult mood, seen clearly, is a passing condition arising from causes, not a fixed identity a person is stuck carrying forever. This recognition, even partially felt, often brings a quiet loosening that circumstances alone could never provide, carrying stillness into a noisy ordinary day. The real test of any of this understanding happens not during quiet reflection, but during an ordinary noisy day, filled with small interruptions and minor demands. A person can pause for one full breath before reacting to an unexpected inconvenience, rather than immediately narrating it as a disaster. This pause is small and mostly invisible to others, yet it is where practice genuinely lives. A practical daily life insight involves noticing the very first physical signal of disturbance, often a tightening in the shoulders or a shortened breath, arriving before any thought has fully formed. Catching this early bodily signal offers an entry point into steadiness that requires no belief system, only attention to something already happening in the body itself. Joseph Goldstein has spoken about returning again and again to simple, direct attention, not as a one-time achievement, but as a continuous, humble practice. One noticed breath during a stressful meeting, one paused moment before replying sharply to a family member. These small, repeated returns quietly reshape how heavily an ordinary, difficult day is carried, without needing the day itself to change at all. The strength found only in letting go. Inner strength within Buddhist teaching looks quite different from how it is often imagined, less like gripping tightly and pushing through, and more like a willingness to release what cannot be controlled anyway. This kind of strength does not resist difficulty through force. It meets difficulty through clear seeing and a steady, non-clinging attention. Letting go here does not mean giving up on responsibilities or becoming indifferent to outcomes. It means releasing the extra layer of demand that things must go a particular way for a person to remain steady. Someone can still care deeply about a situation's outcome while gently releasing the insistence that only one outcome is acceptable. This distinction is subtle, yet it changes the entire emotional weight carried through a difficult day. The Dalai Lama has often spoken of compassion, including compassion directed toward oneself, as a practical strength rather than a soft, passive sentiment. Treating one's own struggle with patience rather than harsh self-criticism is itself a form of quiet inner strength, one that Buddhist teaching consistently returns to as more sustainable than forceful willpower alone. What real inner strength quietly depends on, what becomes visible after sitting with all of this, is that real inner strength depends far less on controlling outer circumstances and far more on right view, seeing experience clearly, without the extra distortion craving and resistance usually add. This is not a small philosophical detail. It sits close to the center of authentic Buddhist practice. Karma, understood correctly here, is simply intention and action occurring in this very moment, not fate or punishment arriving from some distant, unseen ledger. Each small choice, to pause rather than react, to notice rather than deny, to breathe rather than immediately argue, is itself a form of karma, shaping the next moment far more directly than any external circumstance ever could. Nibbana, in this light, is not a distant mystical destination reserved for rare individuals, but the gradual cooling of craving, aversion, and confusion within ordinary moments exactly like these. It is glimpsed briefly whenever a difficult situation is met with clear, steady attention instead of automatic reaction. This glimpse asks for no perfection, only a willingness to keep returning gently, again and again, to what is actually happening right now. Perhaps peace was already waiting here. Perhaps, by now, a quieter question has settled in, one that does not need to be answered immediately or completely. Maybe peace was never located somewhere far ahead in some future arrangement of perfect circumstances, but was quietly available all along, underneath the noise, waiting for attention rather than achievement. There is no need to resolve this fully today, or even this week. Buddhist teaching has never asked for sudden mastery, only steady, patient returning, again and again, to this breath, this moment, this small pause before reaction. Tomorrow will likely bring its own noise, its own minor disturbances, its own quiet invitation to notice rather than immediately react. And perhaps that is enough for now, simply to keep returning, gently, to whatever is actually here, breath by breath, moment by moment. Peace, not as a distant reward, but as a quiet possibility, always somehow nearby.